rap is out of control.
You're now listening to the legendary
Rap is out of control.
Get on it.
Vinyl Esquire.
The podcast that uplifts the DJ culture and honors our legends. Vinyl Esquire with DJ Rip.
You asked for it, you got it. Live from Brooklyn, DJ Riz.
Legendary DJ Eclipse in the place to be.
Clap it up one time.
Live applause.
Vinyl Esquire.
Vinyl Esquire. Culture, truth, music.
DJ Riz. What's up there? And we got DJ Eclipse.
Rap is out of control.
You're a disc jockey?
Rap is out of
Hello
control.
world, I want to welcome you to Vinyl Esquire, the podcast that delivers culture, truth, music. Would you join me, please, in welcoming DJ Rip?
Hello world, I want to welcome you to Vinyl Esquire, and my name is DJ Rip, and Vinyl Esquire is the DJ podcast that uplifts the DJ culture and honors our legends. And without further ado, I would like to welcome to Vinyl Esquire two legendary DJs, two legendary radio hosts, two legendary producers, and two legendary turntablists. I would like to welcome to Vinyl Esquire the legendary DJ Eclipse and DJ Riz.
Yo, what up? What's going on?
I'm good, fellas. How you doing?
Good. Hanging in there, man.
Great.
Everything's great, man. I heard that intro and I was like, man, who's he interviewing today?
like us? Is that us?
Well, the both of you have plenty of radio experience and interviewing experience, so I got to do it right. You know what I mean?
No doubt.
So listen, I want to thank both of you for taking the interview. This is Vinyl Esquire. Again, this is the DJ podcast that uplifts the DJ culture and honors our legends, and the both of you are legendary in the game. You know what I mean? So
thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and get started with both of you, but I'll go ahead and I'm going to ask one question to the both of you. Let's start with Eclipse, okay? So Eclipse, can you tell me who or what made you want to be a DJ?
Oh, man. Well, I was collecting vinyl before I even decided I wanted to be a DJ. So, Rapper's Delight, first 12-inch I bought, got hooked on the sound of hip-hop, and just started buying everything that came out after that, all the early, Joy records and Sugar Hill records. And then it was actually seeing people around me. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, and there was a group called the Magical Four that were doing all kinds of stuff in the city, doing all the events, the skating rink, the living room, the clubs, all the clubs where we would go. And, mind you, I'm like a teenager at this point. But just seeing them and their DJ, Scratch Master Bucket, who now just goes by DJ Buck, who's like a big radio DJ in Connecticut. He was the one that really influenced me in terms of just watching him DJ. I'd see him at USA Skating Rink, and I'd watch all his, what he was playing and the style of how he was playing. And, just seeing that in person, I was like, that's what I want to do. And so I really, give credit to Buck as far as being able to witness firsthand what was going on. And other than that, it was just like the DJs that you would hear on records, like, Grandmaster Flash and stuff like that. Easy Lee, just paying attention to what these brothers were doing. And that really influenced me into wanting to become a DJ.
Wonderful. Eclipse, what was your first DJ name, and what year would you say you started DJing?
Eclipse has been the name since day one, and I became a DJ in '84, and that was when I named myself, 84 DJ Eclipse.
Wonderful. Okay, so Riz, I want to ask you the same question. DJ Riz, Who or what made you want to be a DJ?
Oh man, there's a few people actually. There was a couple of kids in my neighborhood. I grew up in Canarsie, Brooklyn, and there were some local guys. One guy we used to call Fat Frank, and another guy was Mike the Baker, because he used to work in a bakery, and he was really ill with the mixtapes. So those two guys inspired me from the neighborhood-wise, because I was always getting their mixtapes and trying to emulate what they were doing. Then there was another whole side, the radio side, which was, the Molly Malls, the Red Alerts, the Latin Rascals were a real big influence on me. They used to do the Super Mix, Paco Super Mix on 92.3 WKTU. After school, I used to run home and make sure I taped that every day, and they were crazy with the edits, and they had, some guest DJs too on there, The Animal, they had Shep Nunez, they had a bunch of dudes, man, and they were just killing it on the reel-to-reels and the edits. So they really inspired me a lot to try and become a DJ as well. And this was probably around 84, 85.
Wow. So what was your first DJ name, Riz?
A couple of kids in the neighborhood gave me the White Whiz. They called me the White Whiz DJ Riz, and I kind of thought that was cool back then. And now I look at it and I start laughing.
Okay.
But it is what it is. Everybody had their kind of funny name, I think, when they first started, except Eclipse. Eclipse always been Eclipse. That was mine.
That's okay. Everybody, not everyone, I guess Eclipse, has always been Eclipse, but not everyone has been that fortunate. A lot of us have had some funny names over the years. No question.
Funny ass names.
No question.
Yep.
Okay. So that's classic. Okay. So Eclipse.
Yes.
Can you talk to me really quickly, about your journey? Because, let me just throw a few things out there. Now, I understand, you worked and DJ'd for MC Search. You've worked with Stretch Armstrong. You worked at Wild Pitch as an executive, I believe, and you got into radio. So talk to me really quickly about your journey.
Sure. So from growing up in Providence, Rhode Island, migrated down to Columbia, South Carolina, and that was really where I kind of made my bones as far as becoming a DJ. I had just started in Rhode Island, like in the house, bedroom DJ type style, and when I moved to Columbia is where I really kind of like got my skills up to par, and then also that's where I really made my name was down in Columbia. So I was doing all the gigs down there, all the parties, working on music. As a DJ, you kind of become a producer just from being in the mix of things. And so I started producing, I started working with local artists, and a friend of mine, Todd Ray, who also was living in South Carolina at the time, he had already made a record as one of the white boys who was signed to Tin Pan Apple. They kind of came out underneath the Fat Boys umbrella.
Right, yes.
And so I met up with him. He had went up to New York, did his thing, came back down, and was living in South Carolina again. So I met up with him, and we kicked it off. We were producing together, stuff like that. We actually made a demo together for him as an MC. He went back up north trying to push his career, and it didn't work out as far as him becoming an MC again, but it did work out for him getting a production deal at Big Beat Records. And so by him getting that production deal, he started working with a bunch of different artists, and MC Search was one of the artists he was working with, and he ended up producing half of Search's first solo album. So I met Search on a humbug. Search came down to Columbia, South Carolina on a promotional tour. I was working at a record store called Sounds Familiar. Search came through. I was like, yo, my man T-Ray. I know he's producing your album. This is before the album was out. He's like, oh, Todd. I was like, yeah, we produced together, blah, blah, blah. He's like, let me hear your beats. So I started playing Search stuff. Search was like, yo, I love your beats. He's like, would you be interested in working with me? He's like, back up in New York, I actually have this other DJ named Riz who I'm putting down with me. He's like, but I actually want to do an MC and 2 DJ type of group. He's like, so I'd love for you and Riz to be my DJs, and then you can also produce for me. So I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it. I'd never heard of Riz. I had no idea who he was, but obviously I knew who Search was and the whole Third Base stuff. So I just kept in touch with Search, and I started taking trips up to New York, and long story short, I ended up moving in with Search, and me and Riz became his DJs while he was doing his solo stuff. And I started producing for Search, and his album after that first one was entirely produced by me, but it ended up not officially coming out because he severed ways with Def Jam. But during that time, me and Riz, formed a great bond. I mean, I learned that Riz was one of the nicest DJs ever on radio. He's a perfectionist, and that actually helped me kind of like perfect my skills, because prior to that I was a little sloppy, you know what I'm saying? But like looking at someone like Riz, it kind of puts things in perspective. So then, radio, I had started doing radio in Colombia back in like '89. I for like 2 or 3 months I was doing the commercial mix show at the Big DM down there, and that lasted up until the PD got fired. And so when he left, they kind of cleaned house, and so I was out when he was out. But I was doing weekend mixes on commercial radio, and it was great for me because, at that time I was like 18, 19, and I was just, recording the mixes at home, sending them in. And it was funny too, because obviously I'm coming from a northern mentality, so I was playing like Chub Rock and Audio 2 album cuts, and I think the majority of the people down there were like, "What the hell is this?"
Right,
right. So a lot of stuff was going over people's heads, but I loved that little short stint there. And then once I got up to New York with Search and was hanging with Riz, I think it was through both of them, but mainly through Riz. He was tight with like Stretch and Bob and them. So we would just kind of go up to the radio show and start hanging out up at, KCR. And mind you, Riz already had his show at BAU with Wildman Steve. So I would go on Mondays and hang out with Riz at BAU. And then once in a while, me and Riz would go up to Stretch and Bob on KCR. And through that, at that time, 93, 94, Stretch started getting a lot of DJ gigs. And so he was like either, having to do NYC gigs, or he was actually traveling out of the country for gigs. And so he couldn't always make his own radio show. So he would ask me to fill in. And so I started filling in a lot for him up there. And so that actually helped me get my name out in the New York atmosphere. And so that was obviously great for me. And then I was also like working, I started at Wild Pitch, but then went to Fatbeats after Wild Pitch closed. So while I was at Wild Pitch, yes, I was national director of retail promotions there. Search was the executive VP up there at the time.
Right.
So we were doing things up there, and then Wild Pitch ended up folding in 95. And so when they did, I was already in touch with Fatbeats, and Fatbeats had just been around about a year by that time. And when I left Wild Pitch, my intention was to get another, retail gig at another label. But Joe at Fatbeats was like, "Well, why don't you help me out here, because we're growing and we need help." So I started doing that, thinking this is just a part-time thing. And lo and behold, they ended up taking over my life. And so I became, the head honcho over there at the store level at Fatbeats. And so that also helped with the music in terms of always being up on whatever the latest, newest stuff was. And so that helped doing stuff up at the radio. So that's pretty much how it went from, producing radio and, the whole connection between Stretch, Riz, Search, Wild Pitch.
Wow, I mean that alone is just an incredible story, and I
crazy,
really,
right?
Right, absolutely, and I didn't realize how much you and Riz's paths, how far it goes back. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Of crossing each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that's incredible. So Riz, I mean, look, Eclipse just got done talking a little bit about you. So I want to ask you the same question. So talk to me just a little bit about, your journey. I mean, you're a legendary DJ, producer, you've gotten into college radio, and you're one half of the Crooklyn clan, correct? So
yes, sir.
So go ahead and give me a quick snapshot of your journey.
Man, well, it kind of started out similar. I went through telling you about doing the neighborhood parties and stuff like that, and getting into radio was kind of like my first shot at trying to get on radio was at college at Hofstra University, where they already had like a legendary show with Jeff Force, rest in peace to Jeff. The post-punk progressive pop party, and that was WRHU, and it was on Saturday nights at, I think, around midnight. And I know as I was going to school, I would listen to the show and catch like Johnny Juice was the DJ for Jeff, and he was killing shit, man. And he did a lot of stuff with Public Enemy and a couple other groups out in LA. And I had made a mixtape and wanted to get it to Jeff to see if I can possibly do a guest spot sometime. And Jeff got the tape, and he was like, "Wow, I really dig it, man. It sounds great. And, the only thing is we have Johnny Juice DJing." And I was like, "Cool, if ever, there's ever like a time when he goes away or you need somebody to fill in, just let me know." And I think like a couple of weeks later, I got the call saying, "Yeah, Juice is going to be out of town, and you want to do some radio? I was like, hell yeah, man. So my first radio show ever, I think it was 1990. And it just so happened to be crazy because as I was doing the show, there was like MCs walking in. And this is like midnight, like down in the basement at a college radio show on a Saturday night. And, the first guy that walks into the room is Flavor Flav. And I'm like, holy shit, is this what radio is all about?
Right.
And, you know what I mean? So just that in general. Then maybe like a half an hour later, the whole Leaders of the New School came through. This is my first night. I'm like, well, what the fuck is going on, man?
Wow.
And before you know it, the end of the show, it was like freestyle time. And I know, I think Busta had left, and I think Charlie Brown was the only one who stuck around. So it was just Charlie Brown freestyling, and I was just dropping break beats. And it was like, man, I never had so much fun in my life. I was nervous as hell, too, because it was my first night. But, like, to see this all go down in one room on the first night ever was crazy. So, then I started doing RHU on a regular because Juice, I think he was a Navy SEAL or something like that, and he had gone back on duty, if I'm correct. I don't really remember, but it was something towards that, and I started doing it on a regular basis every Saturday night. Your average person in college, just, on Saturday night, they go party. Me, I was just like, man, I'm going to do radio, man.
Right.
Have some fun. So I rocked with Jeffrey for a couple of years. And coincidentally, there was a show in Long Island that was just as legendary, and that was the Wild Man Steve, the hip-hop spot with Wild Man Steve. And, they used to do shows before Steve was there. I think it was Dr. Dre and Ed Lover. I think at T-Money, I think they did like the operating room.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And Bill Stepney, he also had a show on there. So Steve would do the Monday night show, and it just so happened that I don't know if it was towards the tail end of like RHU. It was kind of like, I think I was doing both at one time. I was like the radio whore.
Okay.
And so I wound up doing, stuff with Steve on Monday. And then I think it came to a point where I just started doing the BAU show on Mondays, because Saturdays I was starting to get regular DJ gigs in the clubs. And, it was a lot easier because, nothing was really going on Monday nights. And so, that was probably lasted a couple of years until the show folded. But, every week we'd have, your who's who of artists, man, because back then college radio was really about, all the artists would come up to college radio because it was no other real outlet for them. You know what I mean? Like commercial wasn't really having or really playing that type of stuff.
Right.
So, we'd be able to break these artists, everywhere from, Eminem to Redman to, you name it, man. So every week was pretty dope. And then we'd also have local guys too that were more on the underground scene that went on to do bigger and better things. And, it was just a really good atmosphere to be involved with, radio wise. I mean, then, that jumped to when BAU finished, then, I went to NYU, which was in Manhattan, and my homeboy Mayhem and Martin Moore were doing a show on 89.1, and I know they did 2 nights. I think it was a Wednesday and a Thursday. So when I hit Mayhem and told him that the station was, there was no more BAU, because he used to be an avid listener, and he would, I was like, any way we can, hook it up to where maybe I can DJ one of the nights. And he was like, hell yeah. So I think I was doing the Wednesdays with Mayhem and Martin, and then Mayhem would DJ the Thursdays with Martin as well. So they had 2 nights. And, same thing, man. It's just a couple of years later, just great underground music, and great artists would come up each and every week. He would come to the show and hang out a lot. So that whole radio thing lasted for a long time. And then it went into even myself and Eclipse and a girl named Lynn Gonzalez getting a show together on NYU after Mayhem and Martin had left.
Okay.
And then, when did that last until,
No, well, yeah, in '98. Well, first when while Riz was DJing with Mayhem up there, what had happened was they had gotten into some trouble about like drinking up at the station, and I think some cursing, and so NYU had kicked Mayhem and Martin off, and so obviously Riz was out with them, and so this girl Lynn, who had been doing some announcements on that show, she was given the show because, as most people, are familiar with college stations, you're supposed to be a student to be on air. So she was a student there at NYU, and so they gave her the show. And so as big fans of artists and radio and hip hop, we're listening to the shows every week just to see what's up. And like, we noticed that she really didn't have the knowledge, to kind of go along with the guests she was having and stuff like that. And she really didn't have like a set DJ. She would have, guest DJs from time to time. So after a while, Riz kind of stepped to me and was like, he's like, what do you think about me and you hitting her up and seeing if we could be like the official DJs for the show? And I was obviously like full-fledged in Fatbeats at that time. So, I had all the music, and, obviously Riz had his radio connections from his past and all that stuff. So it was a good combination. And so we did. We stepped to her and said, hey, would you be interested? And, at first she was a little skeptical because she didn't want it to become something where we kind of took over the show. And we told her, like, no, we just want to be part of it, whatever. And so after a while, she agreed. And so we rebranded the show, and that was March of '98. We started with the halftime show, and that was me and Riz and Lynn. And then Lynn, I forget how long Lynn lasted because she eventually graduated. She was probably there for like maybe a year or two. And then she graduated, and then me and Riz kept the show. And then Riz, I'd say about maybe 2001 or maybe 2002, about 4 years into it, Riz kind of got tired of the music, as far as what was coming out, because that was like a really bad time. The 2000s wasn't the greatest era for hip hop, and so
it all started changing. Yes,
it was getting harder and harder for us to kind of figure out, what we wanted to play from week to week. The music was getting slimmer, and so Riz was like, you know what, like, I'm good. I've been doing radio now for like a decade or more, so let me just chill.
I started getting busy too in the clubs too, so I was doing a couple of nights a week, so it was kind of hard to just dedicate, every Wednesday night. Still.
Yeah. So he stepped off around then, and then I kept the show going, and then over the years, I brought in DJ Skiz, who was a student at the time, and then we had other people like, P.D. Cologne and Mars and Navani, and just different people that kind of came in and out and like helped us out with the show. But overall, the show itself, the halftime show, which started in '98, ran up until, was it 2016. So we had an 18-year run.
He kept that shit going, man. It's unbelievable how many more years you did it, and God bless, man. What a great job.
Right.
Yeah, so we put it to bed in 2016.
Wow, that's a long time on radio, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then you were still doing Sirius at the time.
Correct. During that same time frame, I was given an opportunity to have my own show up on Sirius, and so I started Rappers Out of Control on Sirius XM, and so I was doing both shows. And so when it came time to end halftime, I was cool with that because I still had the Sirius show, and it was just much easier for me to do the Sirius show. Since another thing too is the FM show on NYU, we had to make sure all the music was clean.
Right.
A lot of editing.
So much editing, man. Like week to week, we spent hours editing music and cleaning music up for the show. So with the Sirius show, everything was dirty, so it didn't matter. So I didn't have to spend any time preparing in terms of that. So it just made it easier, and so that was it. We did it, halftime 2016, and I just kept going with the Rappers Out of Control show on Sirius.
Wonderful. So I want to get back to that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I don't want to minimize Riz, but so Eclipse, let's go ahead and bounce over to you, and then I'm gonna come back to Riz. So Eclipse, let's talk about production. Can you talk to me about any other records that you may have produced or were a part of? I know you brought up MC Search. Is there any other records or notable projects that you worked on from the production side?
Sure, absolutely. Also, just you mentioned Riz and him being half of the Crooklyn clan. The Crooklyn clan was a spinoff of the Brooklyn Slumlords.
Yep.
And that was actually, that was originally Riz. It was what? It was you, Scribble. Was it just you and Scribble?
And Firstborn from
Firstborn
YBT.
from Young Black Teenagers. Yeah, so it was those three guys, Scribble, Riz, and Firstborn were the Brooklyn Slumlords, and they were doing those kind of party breaks.
Wow.
And then I don't even remember how, but I got involved, and so I think it was maybe the second 12-inch or the third 12-inch of Brooklyn Slumlords. It was me, Scribble, and Riz, and we were doing those kind of party breaks. And then I don't know if we did more than one together, but then after that, we kind of started splitting up, and that's when Riz hooked up with Scissorhands, and they kind of went in the Crooklyn Clan direction, and then me and Scribble did another one, and I forget, what was it? Suburban Vinyl Outlaws, I think was the name we used.
Wow.
After.
Okay.
So Brooklyn Slumlords was the birth, the stepping
it was
stone
the birth
for us
of
to
it
do those
all.
other records. Yeah,
For sure. Yep.
So that was that. And then as far as the straight up production stuff, like I said, that Search album, and then there was I did a remix of Time's Up for OC, which came out which was the B-side of the original version that Buck Wild did, which was obviously a huge underground independent hit,
Right.
and just a staple in New York hip hop. So I'm on the B-side of that. And then I did another remix for OC for Born to Live. I did some stuff. I did a remix for Entice, who was on Wild Pitch at the time. I was doing a lot of like homemade kind of remixes, did some stuff. So I did a remix for Nas that was sanctioned by Columbia at the time to do. I think they had us a bunch of us do remixes. They had Buck Wild do one, they had me do one, and then they picked like the best one they liked. And I think the one they went with was a Def Jeff remix for Life's a Bitch. And then, but I had like my little remixes kind of floating around, with all the radio connections in New York. I just hit everyone off with like a copy on tape or whatever, and people started playing stuff. So that was primarily, my production, that mid-'90s era, a lot of Wild Pitch based stuff. And then obviously also I formed, not I formed, but I was part of Nonfiction as they formed in 95. And so I did a lot of the early Nonfiction demos I produced, which actually haven't been released or heard of. So.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah,
Dope. Okay, so Riz, talk to me about your production. Talk to me of, how did Crooklyn Clan, from your perspective come about? How did the Aviate Records, here's the thing. I'm trying to touch a little bit on both of your history as producers and the entities that you kind of became most known for, right? So, So for Riz, you have Crooklyn Clan, right? And obviously Crooklyn Clan derived from something else. Clearly, you just brought that up. So talk to me about what your particular role was in Crooklyn Clan. How did it come about? And, just a little bit of a backstory on your production.
Yeah, like he was saying before, it all came from that whole Brooklyn Slumlords original crew that made the first party breaks on Nervous Records. Fast forward to the birth of Crooklyn Clan, myself and Scissorhands, who was a neighborhood friend, we just started doing these party breaks as well. And he was always dope with the ASR 10. That was the sampler he used, and he actually showed me how to use it. So then we started messing around. I mean, every day, man. It was like a drug almost. Like, let's go find some samples. Let's go, take this and make this sound like this. It really became like an everyday thing. I think the first one we put out we did it with Nervous, the first one. I forgot the name of it. And then we saw a bunch of dope stuff coming out on Aviate Records. So we wanted to try and see, how to get on that label. And I remember, I think we met with Mark, who was the owner, and I think Manny Napuri, a guy named Manny Napuri. He was one of the Nubian Crackers, and they used to make these dope party breaks as well. These dope instrumental albums on Slammin' Records.
Yeah.
And we met up with those guys, and I think we played them a couple of things, and before you know it, it's like, boom, we're going to be putting out records with you guys. So I want to say the first record I think was Coffee Breaks, And
Right.
we wound up sampling DJ Cool is New York in the House. So we kind of made like a New York-based chant that just repeated over and over again over like the total Can't You See instrumental. And, that thing just in the clubs started going crazy. Even on the radio mix shows, it was kind of like a good transition record, to play in between, where it would just segue from one song into that little party break, and then you would take it wherever you would go. But it started becoming like a mini anthem, and before you know it, you'd hear it at the New York Knicks games. They would be coming out to that, which was kind of dope. Yeah. So after that single, we just started putting out a bunch of stuff, and before you know it, we'd walk into like Rock and Soul or Beach Street, and there'd be a whole wall of our stuff. I mean, there would be a wall of AV8, the whole AV8 section, but then, the majority of the stuff would be ours at one point because we were making so many. And, we made the one with the Franklins and, sampling the Busta Rhymes and Rampage, All My Real Wild Niggas, Throw Your Hands Up, that one. And, those things really much just flew out the door, man, and took a life of its own. So every party, man, you would walk in, you would hear it. It was, nothing but energy. That's what we really focused on, Scissorhands and I, the most was the energy. Like, how do we make this record right off the bat, come out and give you that energy that makes you just want to go crazy, and those records kind of followed that suit. So fast forward maybe to a couple more records down the line, I would get a phone call from a guy named Fatman Scoop, who was a friend of mine, and he had worked at Tommy Boy Records as an A&R. Or no, he was actually a record promoter. I'm sorry. So I had a relationship with Scoop, talking about him servicing records and me playing it on the radio. So we already had that relationship built. So Scoop was hitting me up about an idea that he had about making a party record kind of with him on it. Because I know Scoop was like an MC back in the days, Uptown. He was always doing this thing, running with like DJ Steve D and Rock Raider and that whole crew.
Okay.
Yes. So Scoop had hit me with an idea. So we wound up getting together and just, brainstorming, how can we make a record with this guy? We took our formula and kind of took Scoop's dope voice, because his voice, was very demanding and crowd captivating. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, he had that ultimate party voice. So Scoop actually recorded a few vocals in the crib, and we wound up just taking, telling him to say this, say that, say this, say it this way. He'd have a couple of ideas, and we tell him to, say a certain way, certain cadence, and we would wind up going back. He'd say it, he'd leave, and we just work on it. We chop all his vocals up and try and make sense of, what direction we were going to go in. So the first record we ever did was the Hands Up record, where we used the Busta Rhymes, Put Your Hands Where My Eyes Can See instrumental.
Right.
And here's your introduction to this guy named Fatman Scoop, who he just murdered it. It was the hands up, and I get your hands up. He was at Hot 97 as well at the time, doing the overnights. So it was kind of dope in that situation where Scoop, had that leverage on the radio. And I remember every time he would come on the air when his show started, he would start with that record, and nobody knew what it was. Then it started growing and growing and growing. The record started selling a lot in the stores. People were playing it in the clubs. People were playing it on mix shows. So that whole birth of Fatman Scoop Crooklyn Clan took place from that one record.
Wow.
And then, we wound up going to do a couple of more until we, made that big one, that Be Faithful record.
Woo!
Yeah, man. So It's still to this day kind of bugs me out to hear it in a movie, hear it in a stadium, hear it as one of your go-to wedding songs. You know what I mean? Like how like there's always like the wedding songs that never fail,
yes,
no matter what genre or no matter what type of wedding it was. That
Heat Wave, Always and Forever, and
Yes.
Crooklyn,
Right, yeah.
Be Faithful.
I know, right? Two of the same energy type records, right? But like crazy. So, to this day, it still boggles my mind, man, of how that record was made and the success of it.
Well, I mean, I got to tell you, you're probably the most known unknown entity, right? So, and what I mean by that is I don't know if anyone outside of the industry knows that Riz and Scissorhands are Crooklyn Clan, right? But
probably not.
But I would say, though, that, I got to give it to you, man. And I got to give you a little backstory. So be patient with me. But check this out. So first off, I just want to say salute to you, Riz and Eclipse. Those party breaks that you guys created, Crooklyn Clan and all the other ones you mentioned before that, but especially Crooklyn Clan. I'm a DJ. I've been a DJ since 1984, just like y'all. And I'm from the Midwest. And those records save so many DJs sets. I mean, again, to this day, when you say transition, listen, it is an incredible transition from one record to another, but it's also the life of the party. That Be Faithful record, I mean, the way y'all put it together, and then out of the blue, you want to put in Black Sheep, The Choice Is Yours, out of nowhere. It's incredible. So again, hats off to you and salute to you. But I got to add this backstory. So the most known unknown, I started a production crew called Vintage Tunes about 3 or 4 years ago. Nobody knows it's me and another DJ named Wiz out of Atlanta. And same kind of concept. But Vintage Tunes is just a DJ production remix crew. And we just started doing DJ remixes because everything that you all were doing stopped for a long time. See, Eclipse, you talked about how the music kind of died in the 2000s. Well, you know as well as I do, look at the music in 2021, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So when you talk about what you all were doing in the late 90s and in the 2000s with those party chant DJ remix records, it gave the DJ producer a whole new lane and a whole new genre, right? In the music. So with Vintage Tunes, I wanted to bring that back, and that motivation came through Crooklyn Clan. It came through the Nubian Crackers. It came through what you guys all were doing, and DJ Cool, for that matter. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I always wanted to ask you, Riz, what was the real motivation behind the way you put together the records in Crooklyn Clan? And now I think I get it. You brought up the Latin Rascals, who were incredible, editors and incredible remixers per se, right? So, So I just wanted to, salute to you, Riz, because those Crooklyn Clan records to this day, and salute to Scissorhands, right? But to this day, that Be Faithful record, I don't care what no one says. I've toured with EPMD, Scratch. I work with Flash, Grandmaster Flash, and he plays the song. Okay, so I'm just saying to you that record will always. Now, I don't want to get into the money or whatever, because I heard that the record went platinum, I believe. So I don't know if you ever got your just financially, but I will tell you this: that record will go down in history as a classic. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Just remember how many samples were used. And that should answer your question about financial.
Exactly.
Because
but it was dope too, because Scoop, does shows today still.
Right.
From not just from Be Faithful, from doing a lot of other stuff that he has done, and he's just a dope entertainer, man. So that when you say like the unknown entity, which is us, much, Scissorhands and myself, like, you're right. The average person doesn't know who we are. We were just always the guys that made the records.
Right.
Kind of like the Neptunes, but without we're not doing original stuff, but doing party-based sample records.
And let me let me give you one more thing. I'm gonna tell you when it threw me off, but it resonated. I was a show producer for the Global Spin Awards.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So Riz, I don't know if you remember when I called you. I called Scribble, and I had you two play, and we did the house, kind of EDM type of mixture at the award show. I had y'all play
for Bambaataa, right? For the tribute to Bambaataa.
Right. So yeah, the techno funk, all of that, and yes, for the tribute for Bambaataa. I didn't. Right. I had no idea you were Crooklyn Clan until that day when the show was happening and y'all were on stage. Because again, I was the show producer and I'm a DJ.
Right.
So I was working with Prez and Power Moves, to produce that show. And my responsibility, I had nothing to do with the award side. My responsibility was to produce out the segments, the intros, the outros, the honoring segments. Right. So I would get all the talent together and. Just in conversation, I wanted to get Scribble involved. Scribble was like, you need to get Riz involved. I was like, cool, let's do it. So the show is happening, and y'all are on stage. And I don't even remember. It was somebody from New York came up to me and was like, yo, that's dope how you got half a Crooklyn Clan on stage right now. And I looked at him and I said, what? He said, Crooklyn Clan. And I looked up and I was like, holy shit, I didn't even know that Riz was in Crooklyn Clan.
Damn, Riz, you could have made double the money if you would have made sure he knew you were in Crooklyn Clan that day.
I'm just a modest, quiet guy, and I don't really say much.
So needless to say, man, thank you for doing the Global Spin Awards for me. And
thank you for having. Actually, shout out to Chris Moody, because I actually did our segment Stick Duo, which was an alias, another group that I had with my boy Chris, where we did all house production. So that was like my house music side.
Right.
You wanted the Bambaataa tribute, but like more on the EDM. So we made a Looking for the Perfect Beat remix that was more, EDM driven.
And it was dope and incredible. So again, thank you and salute to you, Riz, for everything that you've done, for the DJ culture alone with Crooklyn Clan. Because
yes, thank you.
Those records, again, party starters, party savers, whatever you want to call them. Now, one question that I have for both of you, and then I want to get on to the Rappers Out of Control radio show that you do together. So what do you believe? Now, rumor has it that DJ Kool's Let Me Clear My Throat may have been one of the first quote-unquote party chant records, right? To me, both of you have coined this, and both of you are foundational creators of this type of record. What do you believe was the first motivation behind party chant records?
That's a good question. I mean, I would think that, the old school rappers, the legendary guys like the DJ Hollywoods and the Busy Bees, they were already doing stuff like that, kind of, freestyling, or whether it was like Hollywood's World or whatever. There was always guys that were doing that. I guess, these type of records, it was just a different era, where it's like, how do we captivate the crowd with something familiar already, but just make it like a party record where it would work in the clubs even more than, maybe just a regular original record. It was just a variation, kind of like a remix,
Right. Absolutely. And again, it's an incredible DJ producer product. You know what I mean? And because, again, you're taking all of the top at that time samples or instrumentals or hit records and then, throwing a vocal sample on top. But then when you take it one step further in Fat Man Scoop, even though you chopped his vocals up, it sounds like a song. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's incredible. Absolutely.
Yeah, Scoop definitely took it to the next level with his vocals and his presence for sure, man.
Absolutely. So Eclipse and Riz. Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about radio. You guys have done so many things together off and on over the years, and so many, legendary things individually. So talk to me about the new show, the show that you guys are doing together now, right? Rappers Out of Control. It's on Shade 45. It's on Sunday nights. Can either of you talk to me a little bit about, the show?
Sure. Well, I'll set it off and then Riz can chime in. So like I mentioned, I don't remember exactly. I have to go back and check, but it's been about, I don't know, 13 or 14 years since I've been doing the show. And it all started off from Premier, who has his own show live from headquarters. And Premier, early on when he was doing his show, similar to how I had to fill in for Stretch, Premier would hit me up like, yo, he's like, I got a gig this weekend and I can't do my show. He's like, I don't really trust hitting up anyone to fill in for me because a lot of people don't play the same stuff I play. And he's like, and plus, you already have a radio background. He's like, you're pretty much the only one I think of that would be able to fill in for me. So I was like, I'd be honored to fill in for you. So I started filling in for Preem on his show, and I did that, from time to time. And that kind of got, the attention of, some of the people up there. Shout out to my man Ron Mills. And then he would have me do, Ron would have me do mixes, just random mixes for the station. And at this time, actually, Ron was in charge of Hip Hop Nation. So Premier show was on Hip Hop Nation. I was doing random mixes for Hip Hop Nation. And then finally, Ron just came out one day and was like, yo, he's like, would you be interested in doing your own show? And I was like, absolutely. So I started doing Rappers Out of Control on Hip Hop Nation, and that's been about 13 or so years ago. And it was funny because he had been telling me this for like months and months and months, like, yo, I want you to do your own show. And then it was just a matter of when are we going to start? And it kept on getting pushed back and pushed back. When he finally gave me the green light, it was like the week I was getting ready to go on tour for like 2 months. So I had to, I actually had my stuff with me, my, turntables and mixer I was touring with. So once a week I'd have to like take my stuff into the hotel room, set it up in the bathroom or wherever I could find space, and do a mix like on the road, and then have to like edit it and throw drops in, this, that, and the third. And then the next day I'd have to email it in, which isn't an easy task when you're driving every single day. So I would actually have to, I would have to pull over the van. Usually someone else was driving because I was editing. I'd have them pull over while we're driving to the next city. We would pull into the parking lot of whatever hotel was in the area, and I would just pick up their Wi-Fi signal from the hotel, and I would upload the files like through Zshare or whatever. And once I knew they went through, I'd be like, all right, come on. And we would continue driving to the next town. So I had to do that for 2 months straight until we got back. So that was the beginning of Rappers Out of Control. It was, it was just a continuation of what me and Riz did on college radio, just, playing dope stuff, unedited. And again, it was like there wasn't really, anyone doing what we did up there. You know what I'm saying? It's like Premier would be the closest one. And even with Premier, it's like, we share a lot of similar tastes, but then he also has a little bit more of a commercial appeal too. And so, he might play stuff that I might not play and vice versa. So, I mean, for us, it was like, for me, for Rappers Out of Control, it was straight up just, the indie scene. And we throw major stuff in there, but it had to fit the format of what we felt was dope. And so I just did that forever and forever and forever. And then eventually Hip Hop Nation, the channel changed format to being strictly like a kind of top 40 situation. So they moved my show and Premier's show over to Shade 45, and that's our new home. And then one day, here comes along DJ Riz, who's like, hey, E, I got the itch to be back on radio again. He's like, would you want to maybe start a new show with me or something like that? And I was like, fuck starting a new show. I was like, just come join me on Rappers Out of Control. And so there it is. 4 years ago, almost to the day, he joined me on Rappers Out of Control. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Wow.
I think I joined before. It was at the tail end of Hip Hop Nation, right?
Oh, yes, I believe so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's when I first started, and then they were like,
Right.
"Oh, we're going to move the show to Shade 45." And
Correct.
I was like, all right, dope.
Right, incredible. So how do you two come together musically, creatively to curate the show every week?
Well, basically with the music, I go through, because I've been going through the music while Riz, hadn't been around. I continue doing that. So every week, I'm going through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of songs that get submitted to me, and I weed out, all the stuff. And then every week I send Riz a folder of like all the new material. And so we both kind of just go through that and pick what we want to play that week. And similar to how we used to do halftime, because Riz was the established DJ and I was kind of the newcomer, I would, Riz would go first and I would come on after him. So I do the same format now. So like, once Riz joins the show again, I let him go first and I go on after him. And so what we do is when we meet up to do the show, I look at his playlist. I look at what he's pulled aside for his set, and then I look at what I pulled aside for my set. And if I notice doubles of anything, I pull out from my set what he has planned to play, and then I just go and fill the holes with a couple other things that I want to play, and that's pretty much it. He'll knock out the first hour, and then I do the second hour, and that's how we get it done.
Works out good.
Very nice. So it's every Sunday on Shea 4-5. It's Rappers Out of Control with DJ Eclipse and DJ Riz, and it's 2 hours, right? And what time does it come on?
10 to 12 Eastern Standard Time.
Wonderful, wonderful, incredible. And I love the show, by the way. Salute. So so let's talk about some new projects. What new projects are you working on together or separately?
Project-wise, I kind of put to a halt because I'm actually going through my record collection and trying to sell my collection. Believe it or not, I have thousands and thousands of records I've accumulated over the years, and kind of doing a digital thing where, another partner of mine, Sean C, used to be down with Vinyl Reanimators, and he used to be one of the owners at Landspeed Records. We kind of are doing this whole lossless digital thing where, we're trying to just replace our collections with just lossless files. And a lossless file, if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's kind of like not your MP3, which is lossy, but like either a wave, a FLAC, an AIFF, where the quality isn't compromised or compressed. So it's like just, top-notch quality stuff. So whether it's us ripping 12 inches, getting albums, getting CD versions, it never ends. This is kind of like a day job on steroids.
Right.
Where you really, I'm selling the records, I'm making money, but I'm also replacing my collection because I'm tired of moving, and I'm tired of moving my records with me.
Right.
And to be honest with you, I love my vinyl. That's, part of my history, your history, E's history as well.
Correct.
But, how many more? I'm not really doing any vinyl-only parties. I still play out in the clubs, and I'm, using Serato. So, I'm trying to just do this now before it gets too late. You know what I mean?
Right. So where can people buy this collection?
I sell on Discogs under the name Live from Brooklyn.
Got you.
And I know E sells some stuff once in a while. He got a little store going, and yeah, man, it's dope. It's just dope to see how many actual people really just love vinyl and continue to buy it.
Absolutely.
I thought, it did die out for a while, but I guess, there's just a strong amount of people that really just love their vinyl, man. It's crazy.
Right. And there's so many people that just, they don't have what you have. You know what I mean? If you weren't collecting all those years, you're just not going to have it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And digitally, you can't find, with Vintage Tunes are doing these remixes, DJs have hit me a lot. Like, where do you get that version from? Or where did you get that from? I'm like, well, there's acapellas on all those 12 inches that I've accumulated for 30 years, 40 years.
Right.
But when I start talking about acapellas and 12 inches and people are like, wow, really? Like, we can't get any of that no more. I'm like, yeah, because they don't press any of that up. But but I'm sure you have everything that you can imagine. You know what I mean?
Man.
So
well, we as a combined force, myself, Sean, and E, we kind of formed a little team of just like, if our copy is not so hot or it's beat up a little bit, then we'll ask E, does he have a dope copy? And E's always been known to have those pristine copies, or at least, like you go into the club, E's the kind of DJ that's taking it out of the inner sleeve, turning it around, then taking it out of the jacket, then putting it on the turntable, and then taking it off and not throwing it on the floor like I used to do.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? Like, so E's one of those guys, so it's kind of good to have E in the crew, you know what I mean? Because we will definitely fill all the holes that are missing.
Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely. Okay, so no new music and, you know, no new projects coming from you, Riz, but definitely focusing on, you know, getting rid of the records or selling off this record collection so you could go to Discogs. And what's your page again on Discogs?
Live from BK.
Got you. Great. So any DJ, anybody that want to get a hold of those records, go there. So now, Eclipse, what about you? Aside from Raps Out of Control, you got any new music, any new projects you're working on?
Yeah, well, I have a management company, Pay to Win Management. It's, you know, like half a dozen like indie, you know, hip hop groups, and so that's kind of like my day job, and you know, and so I'm constantly working on new music with all of those different acts. I'm still involved with Fatbeats. You know, I'm like a consultant for them. So there's a bunch of I'm like an octopus, and I have like 8 hands in different things at all times.
Right, absolutely.
So it's kind of hard to pinpoint one particular thing, but you know, the management stuff definitely between like, you know, Bahamadia and Ill Bill and you know, Nonfiction, Rashid Chappelle, shout out to the Legion, you know, La Coca Nostra. There's a bunch of different entities and groups that I'm constantly like, you know, doing stuff with, whether it's working on new music or touring or just like, you know, trying to take over the world.
Very nice. And all those are legendary groups. And, you know, I would love to hear new music coming from any of them. You know what I mean?
No doubt.
Yeah, so that's incredible. Great. So, Eclipse, how was it like working with Premier?
Premier is like, I mean, he's one of our best friends, you know what I'm saying? Riz too. It's like, you know, he's just same-minded individual, you know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, you would, I guess for people that might not be as familiar with him, you know, they don't get to know the familiar side of him, but he's like just a straight down to earth dude, you know, cracks jokes, the whole thing. It's family, you know, all of us. And so it's a pleasure to you know, be able to do stuff with him and for him, and likewise he does the same thing. You know, whenever, you know, back before me and Riz were doing the show together, if there was a day I couldn't do the radio, you know, Premier would fill in for me. You know what I'm saying? So you know, we got each other's back when it comes to stuff like that. You know, so it's it's family. It's all this family.
Wonderful. Yep. Wonderful. Mm-hmm. Out of your whole career, all the artists that you've worked with, either produced, remixed, interviewed, or whatever, is there any artist that you never got a chance to work with that either of you wanted to, in any capacity?
I mean, even interviews, right? There was a couple that we never got to.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? For me, this is. It's funny because most people, when you ask someone like who they want to work with or who they want to interview, it's always going to be like the biggest artists in the world, your Jay-Z's or your, you know, whatever. And actually, I've never did interview Jay. You know, we never had him on the show, but not to say I wouldn't want to. But for me, I get my enjoyment when I interview people like T-Ski Valley, or when I interview people like Taz. You know what I'm saying? When I interview, you know, like the pioneers, the history of where it came from, that means so much more to me than who's on top right now. You know what I'm saying?
I agree.
Yeah. I agree as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask Riz, like, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you can ask Riz, like, this, you know, these last couple of months, being that the Sirius building is still shut down, you know, we haven't had guests up on the show. And so usually when we have guests up on the show, we always get them to record drops and stuff for the show. But since we haven't been doing that, I've just been reaching out to everyone I know, like, yo, send me drops. And they're all from like the old first generation. You know what I'm saying? Like, give me a drop. I need a drop right now. Yo, Raheem, I get drops. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
That's what means something to me, is having that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
absolutely.
Right. It's always the guys that, you know, came before us that we you know, we idolize. Like, to this day, I'll tell Red Alert every time I see him, no matter what. Like, yo, Red, man, you know, like, God, I can't even believe it, man. We're good friends now, and like, I never even thought that, you know, back in the days. And you're the, you know, uncle that everybody wants. You know what I mean? Like, one of the greatest dude ever. You know what I mean? Absolutely.
Yes, sir. And I totally agree about Red Alert, and I still can't believe that he calls me right? So like
Crazy.
like literally Red will call me and be like, yo, Rip, I love what you're doing with Vinyl Esquire. Please interview this person or
Nice. Wow.
or that person. You know what I mean? And
Red's the best.
yeah, Red,
Yeah, he really is.
yeah,
He
Red,
really is.
Red is the best. He's that one guy that no one can hate. Even if you want
Absolutely.
to, you can't hate him,
Absolutely.
right? He,
Yeah.
yeah. Red is a legend.
If-
Incredible.
If you hate him, there's something wrong with you.
That's
know?
correct.
Yep. There you go.
That's correct, because he has love for everybody. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
absolutely. Okay, so Riz, Eclipse, tell me how you personally feel about the current DJ culture.
Well, I mean, I don't keep up with a lot of the new DJ culture. Like when you say that, like to me, I think of like, you know, DMC battles and, you know, stuff of that nature. And even though those competitions and stuff are still going, the last couple of times that I went and checked out some of the battles, I just really, it's hard because we come from such a rich history of artists, you know, especially like that 90s era. I think we've kind of seen the pinnacle of everything from producers to DJs to MCs. The 90s kind of was like, to me, where the height of everything was. And so if you're not going to show me something better or different from what they were doing, it's hard to impress me now.
Yeah.
And so I feel that, like, I appreciate that all those platforms are still here, and I appreciate that there's still that culture going. It's just hard to really enjoy it as much as where we've already come from, because we've kind of already seen the greats. But with that being said, I still love when I get to see and meet someone like a DJ Pearly, you know, who takes the best of what we've seen, and you can see it in her routines that, like, you know, she is the next generation, and she is the, you know, the type of person that's trying to propel this art form. So it's not as plentiful to me as it was back then, but there are still gems, you know, here and there that do something that I'm like, oh shit, that was dope, and that's someone to kind of check for, you know?
Right. Yeah. There's plenty of dope DJs in this era that, you know, it's just a different era, like he said, where, you know, the technology became more advanced to where, you know, there's like a lot of things you could do that you couldn't do back then. So, you know, back then it was a lot of raw skills, you know what I mean?
Right.
Right.
2 turntables, a mixer, and, you know, you get busy. And now it's just, you know, you can sample, you can play beats, you can loop, and there's a million things you can do now. And there are plenty of DJs that I saw recently that are incredible. So, you know, it kind of works both ways. And then to build on what you were asking about, there's also the club DJ, which I'm still involved with as well, because, you know, I've been doing clubs for so long. You know, there are a lot of dope club DJs, that still exist today, but then there are an overabundance of DJs, and I think technology helped make that happen to where, you know, a lot of people, you know, now promoters are DJs. They'll walk in and you know, they think they're DJs because they, you know music, and they might know the crowd, and it's just crazy because they really don't know, you know what I mean? Like, they don't have the experience of being in the club and rocking crowds for years, you know what I mean? So it's definitely a double-edged sword where it can be confusing. I mean, there are, like I said, there's a bunch of dope young DJs that I see in the clubs and in the battle scene, but, you know, it's hard to really replicate from when we were growing up and doing it as well, man, because it's just a whole different level of you know, technology-wise and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I always like to ask, you know, legendary and seasoned DJs that come from the era, that come from turntables and vinyl and, you know, all of that, to see, you know, how they feel about, you know, the current, you know, the state of the DJ and the culture and the scene, you know what I mean, with technology, you know, as a factor. You know what I mean? So, and since Eclipse, you dropped a name, that's dope, because, you know, it's like, well, you're all legends. Like, yes, it's hard to impress us. It's hard. I've asked Cash Money, like, what impresses you now? Yo, Jeff, Flash, what could possibly happen on them turntables that can impress you? And it's hard. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So that's great. So what about the music? What about, how do you feel about, you know, the current state of hip hop in 2021? And is there any new artists that we should be looking out for?
Well, I think that similar to what I said about Pearly, that kind of across the whole scene. It's like, being that we've seen the best of what's out there. Again, it is hard to impress us on any level, but there is a huge underground independent scene, more so now than there ever has been. Because of the fact of, like Riz was saying about technology. Long gone are the days where the only way you found out about a person was if they were able to press up a 12-inch.
Right.
So now it's like artists are putting out albums monthly. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Where,
right. Keep up with it.
Yeah, so it's impossible to even keep up with all the music. But there is no shortage by any means of dope new music out there. The only difference is that now you have to know where to look for it. It's like we come up with an era where everything was kind of on the same, path. Like in the 90s, most of the groups prior to like the indie scene kind of starting, like the early 90s, when something was released, it was released to the world. And so we were all on the same page. We knew when Black Sheep came out. We knew when Tribe came out. We knew when Gangstar came out. We were all up on the same things at the same time.
Right.
That era is now gone. And the same type of groups that make that same kind of music, they're more underground now. And so you have to kind of know where to look for them. And that's where we come in. That's our job, is to make sure we go through all the music and we play what we feel is the best that represents the sound of what we came up on. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people like to say, oh, that's considered boom bap, or that's considered whatever. It's like, no, that's considered a New York sound. We have a sound. We have a sound
Right.
that we're used to hearing coming out of New York.
Absolutely.
And that's not to say that someone from LA can't make the same sound. It's a sound that's affiliated with us. The same way when you think of like trap music, you think of the South. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's a sound that kind of originated from down south. And so you can be from wherever making that sound, but that's their sound. New York has a sound, so we play that kind of a sound no matter where it's from. It could be from LA, it could be from Texas, it could be from Canada, from wherever it is. But we have a particular sound that we like, and we play like the stuff that would represent a Quali record, or a Little Brother record, or a Gangstar record, or a Pete and CL, or Wu-Tang record. There's so many different variations of styles within what is considered to me like a New York sound. And there's no shortage of artists that make that same kind of music. A lot of people are up on Griselda, and those guys are dope. They kind of reawoken that sound. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not necessarily doing anything new, but they're filling a void of the same way why you said, Rip, that you started your company was because there was a void in those party breaks.
That's correct.
Well, there was a void in the Griselda sound in New York. Most people in New York were trying to make Southern records and try to make other sounding records. And so Griselda came, West Side Gun and them came, and they said, hey, we're going to make grimy records again. And I'm glad it took off, you know what I'm saying? So now they're at the top of the food chain for that sound, and there's a gazillion MCs that are mimicking the style of what they do. And so, we're radio DJs. We don't necessarily, care about hits for the radio. That's for the clubs. But for the radio, just give us some dope beats, some dope rhymes, and let us do the rest. And so there's a whole slew of artists that fall underneath that umbrella, and just other MCs that are just dope that, continue to make dope music. And so it is harder for us to try to fill a 2-hour show and give the right amount of attention to everyone, because it's impossible.
Yeah,
We're still, we played a new Grandmaster Caz record last week. You know what I'm saying? We're playing Sadat X records all the time. So we're trying to play every generation of music that's new. You know what I'm saying? So it's like we're still trying to support the Kazes, and we're still trying to support the Sadat X's and every generation and the OCs, but at the same time, giving light and attention to the new dudes that's coming out just now, the Rashid Chappelles, the Daniel Sons, the Crime Apples, all these dudes that that just they're continuing to make dope music. And so we're doing our best to let you know, hey, There's still dope music out there. You're not going to hear it when you turn on Hot 97. You're not.
Right,
But
right.
listen to these mix shows. Mix shows, that's where we come from, Rip. Mix shows.
That's
Yeah,
right.
The
mix
reason.
shows.
That's right.
Mix shows was the place where you went to hear this stuff.
That's
it wasn't
right.
being played during the day. You had to go to the mix shows. So
Right.
there you go. I'm done.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're 100% right, and I always like to hear that energy because we need to know where to find the music, because you just can't tell me that everything on the radio, that's what it is. Commercial radio. Like, there's you can't tell me that the New York sound stopped. Hip hop just stopped, right?
Sure.
So you just got to know where to find it. And salute to you two for supporting and pushing the envelope on that, on Rappers Out of Control. You know what I mean?
No doubt.
So that's that's incredible. So I would assume to find some of these artists you're talking about, Eclipse, they just have to search it out on the internet, right? And just look for it, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like, nowadays, if you go to like YouTube and you're looking for one specific artist, once you type that one artist in, YouTube's going to give you a dozen different examples of stuff that sounds like that. So it's easier to go down a rabbit hole these days, and like we do, we post our playlist every week. So even if you're not able to catch the show live, you can look at the playlist on our website and you can see who we're playing. So all you got to do is just put that name in there and just Google it, you know what I'm saying? Like, and go down the rabbit hole and find out, what they sound like or what other suggested artists sound like that are like them.
Wow. And what website would that be?
The name of the show, rappersoutofcontrol.com.
Wonderful. So what's in the future for DJ Eclipse and DJ Riz?
Well, Riz is kind of old now. I don't know how much more of a future he has.
I'm going to say it like I always say it to E. You will be always older than me. And that's a fact.
I think, I'll let Riz will speak, but like, I believe we're both like-minded. You know what I'm saying? It's like we care about the culture, you know what I'm saying? We care about, it's funny because a lot of artists come out and say this is for the culture, and it's like, and it's really for themselves. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
This all goes back to what you said, Rip, about people might not know who Riz is within Crooklyn Clan. That's our thing. It's like, we've never really pushed our names as the main artist. It's more about us pushing the culture. I'm part of Rocksteady Crew. It's like, for years we were throwing those anniversary events, at different locations. And, and it was never about me. It was about putting on the best show possible for the public. Because I remember when I was a fan in the audience, not to say I'm not anymore, but before I got into the scene, just going to a show and taking it all in. I remember that experience. So I want to put the best experience on so the person in the audience can walk away saying, man, that was a great show. And so that's what we do, everything we do, whether it's making records, whether it's doing the radio. We want every episode to stand out like this is the best episode we can do. So we're gonna continue to just keep supporting and representing the culture the way we were brought up to, the way the people that before us did it, the Awesome Twos and the Marleys and the Reds and Latin Rascals and all those dudes.
Absolutely.
Like, we're students of them. And so
100%.
we're doing our best job of maintaining that legacy, giving you our take on it, and at the same time teaching the next generation this is how it should be done.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, Riz, what are you going to say out of that?
Sometimes it's funny. Like I'll set up, right, and we're about to do the show, and like I'll play like a Moneybag Yo record just to joke around with E. And like he's like, what the hell is this, man? And we just start laughing, man. And it's like, mind you, I have to keep up with all that stuff too, because I still play clubs. So
right.
I have a whole, I've always had that alias of like, underground party guy, like he is. He's like a one-man band with a bunch of jobs. It's kind of like what I was too, my whole career, just doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. And it's just funny that, you mentioned like the music of today. So, I like some of it and I don't like some of it, but
right.
To each their own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So gentlemen, before we get out of here, I would like for each one of you to give me a story. Just give me one hip hop moment that has happened in your life, in your whole career, that's memorable, that someone might not know about you. So Eclipse, you can start first, and then Riz, you can go. And once again, I'll repeat it. Can you give me just one historical thing that's monumental that has happened in your career? One backstory that someone might not know about you.
That's monumental. That's the hard one. I mean, I'll tell you what, that's monumental, you know, for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, when Fatbeats was in its heyday, we started closing the store. I believe it was the last Sunday of the month. And the plan was that we were going to use that Sunday to kind of have like a Fatbeats family, like basketball game or whatever. And honestly, it never took off. Like, we never ended up getting everyone together, but we kept the store closed for that one day a month. And I remember one Sunday, I got a phone call. This is back when I still had a home phone and a voice message on it.
Okay.
And I remember the phone rang, and I let the voice message pick up, and it was Premier. And this was like, I mean, I must have barely just known him then at that point. And Premier's like, yo, E, he's like, it's Premier. And he's like, and then I got Pete Rock with me, and Pete's on the other line, like, yo, E, pick up. And they're like, yo, we want to go to Fatbeats. And so I pick up the phone, and I'm like, yo, what's up? And they're like, yo, we want to go shopping today. And I'm like, you know, the store's closed today. I was like, but I tell you what, I'm home today. If you all want to come pick me up, I'll open the store for you all. And so sure enough, they did. Preem and Pete picked me up, and we drove to Fatbeats, and I opened up the store for them, and you know, they did shopping that day. And just the stories, I didn't say one word the whole day. I was just listening to the stories of who fucked who dated who,
Wow.
who was this, like, yo, the craziest shit. Like, I was just like soaking it all up. And that for me was a big like moment of like, I'm riding with Pete and Premier on the way to Fatbeats. You know what I'm saying? I'm in fanboy mode. And again, it was like that early on. So that's a big memory for me.
Wow, that's an incredible story. Riz, what you got?
God, there's probably a few, but I would say the most recent one that kind of stands out was when they were doing the Super Bowl. I think not this past year, but the year before. And they had like this segment of all these who was it? It was a bunch of all the Hall of Fame players, and they did this crazy commercial. It was like inside a party, and these guys were just like running each other over, running on tables, throwing the ball to the next guy who was all of Peyton Manning, and then Peyton Manning throwing it to Jerry Rice. He falls on the table. And while this is going on, what's playing in the background? A Crooklyn Clan, Batman Scoop, DJ Cool record named "It Takes Cool," and that was the song that they used for this, this amazing video that they posted for the Super Bowl. So tons of people saw it. I mean, I'm one of the biggest NFL fans, an ex-athlete, and I used to work for the NFL for like 10 years doing, DJing a lot of the special events. So it really hit home for me, man. And it was like, wow, this all combines and comes into one little thing, of like history, the sports, the music, and wow, you know what I mean? Like, damn, this. So that really was a great moment that just happened a few years ago, actually.
Wow.
Which I'll never forget.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. The most known unknown, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That I gotta use that nickname, Rip.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
You could have it. You're the most known unknown, no question about it.
Thanks. Thanks for making me feel great today.
So I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but
no, it's all good, man. It's all good. I'm good.
So gentlemen, how can our listeners continue to follow both of you?
I'm on Instagram at DJ Eclipse RSC, which stands for Rocksteady Crew, DJ Eclipse RSC. On Twitter, it's DJ Eclipse. It's DJ Eclipse.
I think, all across the board, all the platforms is DJ RIZNYC.
Wonderful. And one more time, the website for the radio show, it's rapisoutofcontrol.com, correct?
Yeah, Rap is Out of Control, OUTTA, rapisoutofcontrol.com.
And the page on Discogs to get your records and buy your record collection, Riz, is what again?
Live from BK.
Wonderful. Well, gentlemen, in closing, I want to thank the both of you. You're both legendary, like I said in the intro, legendary DJs, legendary producers, legendary radio hosts, and y'all both nice on the turntables. So I want to thank you for allowing me to interview you for Vinyl Esquire. This is the DJ podcast that uplifts the DJ culture and honors our legends. And you are now listening to the legendary DJ Eclipse and DJ Riz.
Right.
Thank you.
Hello world, I want to welcome you to Vinyl Esquire, the podcast that delivers culture, truth, music.
Come on, Jeff, what's up? Now Peter Piper, Big Peppers, but run right, ride, Humpty Dumpty, down, that's his art, try, nibble, nibble, bring it back. Now Peter, 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 Big Peppers, but run right, ride, Humpty Dumpty, down, that's his art, that's his art, time, nibble, nibble, anyone, quick,